August 24.
24 ओके
वो ज्वाइन कर रहा है ना मैनुअली
हाँ तो फिर करने देते हैं थोड़ा सा
राजीव मल्होत्रा
हाँ करने देते हैं मेरे ख्याल से
लिस्ट दिखाऊं आपको
हाँ
कौन कौन आ चुका है
हाँ दिख सकता है हाँ
पढ़ना इधर से मुश्किल
छोड़ दे
हाँ पढ़ना तो बहुत जरूरी है हाँ जी 60 प्लस so we start Good morning, everyone. This is the first webinar.
सुनाई जा रहा है कबल बोल
जानी राजी
कोई रिस्पांस नहीं आ रहा उधर से कपूर साहब
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
अच्छा
Good morning, sir. सुनाई दे रहा है
ठीक है Good morning, everyone. This is the first in a series of webinars that Delhi Regional Chapter intends to conduct. This seminar is on Master Plan for Delhi 2041, an approach towards responsive planning. And the critical word here is responsive. So we will be debating on this. We have a lineup of scholars here who will participate, debate, and deliberate on responsive planning. Before I spend any further time on this topic, let me again give my warm welcome. It is a privilege to invite Professor Dr. Meshram, and the President of the Institute of Town Planners, India, for his opening remarks and opening address. He is our chief guest today, Professor Meshram.
Thank you, Professor Ashok Kumar. Very good morning to all the participants and the newly elected chairman of Delhi Regional Chapter and his team, J.K. Kapoor, Secretary, and Treasurer Mr. Jeevan. So I welcome them, this being the first meeting of the DRC. The honorable key speakers are also there and panelists are also there. We welcome to them also. This subject is very important and very sensitive. That is why when Professor Ashok Kumar asked me to say a few words, I wanted to withdraw from that being very sensitive issue to be discussed. But then due to his insistence, persistently, I have to be here. Okay, fine, the subject is very important. And he has also said a controversial word, that is responsive. So everybody wanted to know that MPD 2041, how much responsive it will be. But responsive means what? To what subjects or to what objects or to what issues it will be responsive, that is also required to be discussed and deliberated. Specifically, the situation is not the same when the DDA prepared the master plan for Delhi in the 1962, 1981, 2021. Reason being, this situation has been created by the pandemic COVID-19. And how much this MPT 2041 will be responsive to this pandemic, that is what everybody wanted to say, and everybody is very eagerly waiting for that. Now and then, because when the last time when the Professor Ashok Kumar was the key speaker, he himself has said that the pandemic has not affected equally to all the segment of the society, but it has really affected very much, too much, more intensively to the poor strata of the society. So how is this that MPD 2041 will be responsive to all these issues is required to be discussed, deliberated, and all these things. Another issue which is very important, which everybody was expecting when we started the first webinar on Delhi earlier. At that time, it was said that not only the poor has been affected, but the high density areas have also been affected. That is what, again, what response MPD 2041 is going to be is required to be discussed. At the same time, it was also deliberated that the return migration may not take place, but then by the passage of the time within 2-3 months, specifically we are living Trans-Jamna, we are seeing that the majority of the service population has returned back and they have resumed their duties as usual. So that particular question, whether the return migration will take place or not, and slowly it has started taking place. So definitely MPD 2041 has to give the response to this particular situation which is now present. The next issue which I would also like to see the response of the MPD 41 on this SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 6, which discuss about the clean water and sanitation, SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, SDG 14, Life Below Water, and SDG 15, Life on Land. These are the issues which the 2041 has to give the response that how they are going to deal with that is really difficult task, but that is what is required to be done. I'm taking more time.
No, not at all.
Okay. And then provide for the people and environment friendly mobility, because whenever we prepare a development plan, we really take into the consideration the automobiles and fast moving vehicles. Here it is a time now really to shift from that particular parameter to the mobility for the environment friendly vehicles, that is cycles, rickshaws and pedestrians. This is what is required to be really addressed and addressed in a very clear term that the people really accept that. Then the issue of the blue and green infrastructure, that is also required to be really addressed in very much detail, because the green spaces are being eaten away by the developmental activities, and how we are going to keep a balance between the green spaces or green infrastructure and the development. That is also the issue required to be accommodated. And the great challenge, rather the response required, is how they are going to really settle or provide to accommodate the projected population for 2041, because Delhi is a landlocked state. One side there is a UP, another side there is Haryana, third side there is a Rajasthan, and there is no scope for the expansion of Delhi in terms of the land. And then how this much population is really going to be accommodated is really a great question, for which the response is required to be given by the 2041, because land is very limited. Then when the land is limited, should we go for the dense population or dense development? If we are opting for the dense development, and how much dense it should be? But due to the COVID, another issue has come, and then due to the COVID, we are proposing that there should be the sparse development. If the sparse development is to be really taken place, then where is the land? Delhi is a landlocked state, as I already said. Anyway, there are so many issues which are required to be discussed, deliberated, and all these things. So I will stop over here, and then thank you very much, Chairman Sahab, for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for flagging these important issues. Certainly, most of them we will cover during the discussions. We also have with us Secretary General of the ITPI, Shri Pradeep Kapoorji. I will request him now to give his address.
Thank you, Dr. Ashok Kumar. Thanks, DRC. As a customary, on the occasion of annual general meeting of ITPI, DRC takes initiative to organize one technical session every year. And this year, because of COVID, we are organizing this online. AGM is also being organized online. Earlier, we were planning to organize physical meeting, but that was not possible. So around 10 years back, we decided to organize AGM also online. And probably all of you must have got the link to join AGM at 2 p.m. today on Zoom. This is displayed on the website also, and through chapters we have tried to contact all the members to give them the meeting password and link. This is really, as said by Dr. Meshram, it's a controversial in the sense that in every city, people have different experiences of master plans, whether it's the content of master plan or subsequently the gaps in implementation of master plan. When we face different problems in different cities, Delhi is a unique city in terms of, because it's a national capital, that is one. There are challenges because of the activities of neighboring states. Even Delhi doesn't have its own weather. The weather of Delhi fluctuates with the weather in the north, whether it's cold, and sometimes in summers, the winds traveling, the warm winds traveling from Rajasthan towards Delhi, that changes the weather of Delhi also. So we are very keen to listen to the speakers that what is there in the master plan, because in last 6-7 months, we have faced a lot of challenges in terms of housing for poor, particularly the migrant workers. Now we are facing the environment conditions. So these two issues are very pertinent to be addressed in the master plan, besides the routine things of transportation, general housing, and whether we can decentralize certain activities from Delhi being the national capital. Why can't, when we are investing so much again in the Delhi to rebuild the national capital offices of central government, it would appropriate, as far as I feel, that these activities could have been dispersed in the neighboring states, but that is a wide thought. I hope that the speakers will enlighten us that what is there in the master plan 2041 of Delhi, and we are very keen to listen to them. And I hope that all participants will be benefited with the deliberations during this webinar. Thank you very much once again to all office bearers of DRC and all the participants. I welcome on all of them on behalf of ITPI. Thank you.
Thank you, Kubur. And now, before I introduce the speaker and panelist, there is slight change. Commissioner Planning, Delhi Development Authority, she was supposed to be here to make a presentation, but due to an emergency at her home, she was unable to come. But another important person who is deeply involved in the preparation of Delhi Master Plan 2041, he is here, and I warmly welcome Mr. Nilesh Rajadhyaks. He is a trained architect and a planner. At the present moment, he is working on master plan for Delhi at NAUA. He has over 20 years of experience, and he has worked on a variety of projects. Some of these important projects are livability standards in cities. This project was done by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, so he was involved in that project. Then he also coordinated a project on National PPP Capacity Building Program. This was with the Ministry of Finance. He also worked on regional capacity building hubs program of Mahua, covering 14 states. And he has involvement in the JNNURM as well. And he did work also for the 13th Finance Commission. So very rich background and very varied experience Nilesh has. Today, he's working on Delhi Master Plan 2041. So it would be, we are looking forward to his presentation. With these few words of introduction, now I invite Mr. Nilesh Rajadhyaksh for his presentation. Mr. Nilesh Rajadhyaksh, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen for the presentation. Is the screen visible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm going to try and do, and filling in Linu ma'am's shoes is not a very easy thing to do. She is Commissioner DDA, and she could have kind of, spoken about it with much more confidence. I speak from the position of somebody who's been involved in supporting the DDA in putting the master plan together at the back end. Will try my best to put across all of the big ideas that the master plan is trying to bring together as part of Master Plan 41. You can see the title of the presentation. The idea is to reinvent Delhi and reinvent the master plan that really shapes Delhi in a big way. And so, the target is to try and take a major break from what we have been doing in the past, which is in the form of minor modifications, but really reinvent the plan from the ground up to try and make it understandable to people, because that's one thing that even planners are facing when they're reading the plan. Is often very difficult to kind of understand it and get to the material very quickly. So one of the things that the plan will try and do is, also make it very, very people friendly. So without much ado, let me just get into it. So what do we want to achieve? What did NIUA set itself out to do when it started looking at the master plan? For the first time, we tried and did a very detailed baseline exercise, and some of the things that came out, I'll again refer to it in the rest of the presentation. But some of the things, big markers that came out to us, and I'm only showing some big ones, is that the metro trips, for instance, have tripled in the past few decades and years. But a large part of this metro ridership is actually regional ridership. It's not actually the locals really using the metro on a daily basis for their local commute. You have therefore continued to see, even despite being one of the best metros anywhere in the country, you're still seeing about 40% increase in personal vehicles per thousand. And things like bus trips, so which should have complemented the metro trips, have also come down by about 40%. When you look at the waste management angle, you see that there is practically no segregation in most of the MCDs, although some are kind of moving on this, but there is really no traction as of now. A lot of the waste actually ends up at the landfills. Ghazipur is just 8 meters short of Qutub Minar. Just wanted to put that number out to get a sense of how bad the situation on solid waste really is. Third is that we also are resource guzzlers. So the peak power demand in Delhi doubled in the past decade, and at its highest, it is more than Mumbai, Kolkata, and Chennai put together in terms of peak demand. So I mean, that's how much energy Delhi tends to consume. A large part of this actually comes from air conditioning systems, and actually the residential sector contributes substantially. So somewhere the building design, built environment is something that we need to think about very strongly. A large part of the build stock also happens to be fairly vulnerable to disaster. On the water side, I'm quickly running through numbers, all right? We can discuss some of these in detail during the discussion. 20% of the city, 20% water deficit, if one was to actually calculate numbers, is being estimated just as we stand. The NRW itself is much higher than the national prescribed norms. and actually a very small quantity of wastewater we are able to reuse right now. This is not so much just a question of whether we are treating wastewater, but there we haven't created enough of a market for consumption of wastewater. So that's where also the problem is. We happen to be the 6th most polluted city. I mean, those were the numbers in 2018. I'm not sure what it is right now. Also the second noisiest on some of the indicators. 70% of all of Yamuna's recorded pollution actually comes within the 22-kilometer stretch of Delhi. Although we do have a lot of ecological assets, it's probably one of the richest cities in terms of eco assets and touted as one of the greenest everywhere in the country. This is largely untapped in terms of citizen connect, in terms of pollution levels and the threat that some of these assets are going through. And also, if you look at some of the lands that were marked for the green belt, lands that are, there are a lot of natural drains that flow through the city, which could have become potential green assets. All of these are untapped potentials of the city. If I move on, you look at housing, there is a major demand and supply gap. Affordable housing is really not being met because of the excessive land costs. And the result of that is very, very evident to all of us. A large part of the city actually is unauthorized colonies and unplanned areas. And of course, facilities, etc., are also fairly inequitably distributed. There are opportunities, of course, because the FAR regime is so low. There is perhaps a potential for renewal and intensification in strategic areas. Meshram sir actually pointed out the fact that we are landlocked and there is a land issue, no doubt about that. But it is again one of the few cities which has the kind of greenfield opportunities that Delhi does. And so the land pooling, almost 19,000 hectares of land has been opened up now. The question is what kind of development and whether we can actually get the market to participate on it. So that's something that we need to work on. Well, it's a potential World Heritage City. We haven't yet achieved that mark, but on the heritage and culture front also, we have a lot of things going for the city, but they've yet remained untapped potentials. Economically also, numerous reports cite Delhi and the NCR as a startup capital, as a major hub for health and education. Again, some of these sectors are nascent and they're cleaner sectors, so they can really be pushed in the next master plan. What we need to be mindful of when we're thinking of economy, however, is that a substantial working population of the city, the labor force, actually remains unorganized. And there's also a lot of migrants who enter the city, and that migrants' spectrum is a fairly large spectrum. And so I don't think at any point we can say that the entire city is going to be just about service sector or core banking sector, etc. There is still a substantial part that is focused around manufacturing, MSMEs, etc., home-based industry, and that will need to be the focus of the plan. So what we realized is that largely, if you look at the big ticket indicators that are coming out, you're looking at sustainable mobility, you're looking at resource efficiency, because we are energy guzzlers, you're looking at safety and resilience, water security, because we are very, very water insecure city just as we stand, cleaner and ecologically sensitive development, better built environment and facilities, move away from the degradation that we are experiencing, focus on strategic development rather than wholesale citywide imaginations. If we can get into some kind of strategic frameworks, look at cultural hubs, Delhi as a cultural hub, and try in the regional, within the NCR framework itself, try and develop some kind of a niche, specialized economic activity within the city. Broadly speaking, what we were then saying is that the first 5 areas really give you the core logic of environmental sensitivity, sustainability. The next 5, which is safety, cleaner ecology, better environments to live in, and strategic development would probably help you achieve. And the third is more about economic and cultural vitality. So what the master plan has set itself out to do is just look at these elements, which are also parts of the MOA's big strategies going forward. If these become the major, can I request some of the participants to mute their mic? There is some disturbance in the background. Thank you. So these 3 are becoming the pillars of what we are crafting out as the vision for Delhi. Now, some of the questions that we were trying to answer is that when we looked at the present planning frameworks or even some of the past planning efforts, we realized that there are four major issues. One is that all of our previous efforts have been really norm-based, that you have, predetermined norms for land use distribution, FAR, ground cover, etc., which neither reflect ground realities nor constraints and opportunities on the ground, market needs. So there is a need to probably look at more flexible norms depending on what is the outcome that you want in a particular area in the city. Second, well, plan making exercises, and this has been a standard criticism. I'm going to be talking to people who have taught me this very logic, that master plans tend to be very, very exclusive, is that they're really driven by planners, made by planners, and without really taking the aspirations or the pain points of the stakeholders and people into the plan. People statutorily are only involved after plan preparation in the suggestion objection process. And also plans have generally tended to be fairly male oriented towards the middle class vehicle owning population of the city. And that is something that we also need to balance out somewhere as part of the plan. Third big issue that we felt was that it's regulatory in nature, is that it focuses on controlling development rather than enabling new ideas, designs, or mixes. And the focus is on norms rather than bigger strategies for achieving city level outcomes. The norms, we felt, can actually play a subservient role to what is the outcome that you want to achieve out of the city. And the last is, of course, that it's fairly static in nature, because the previous plan also spoke about some kind of review mechanism, but not much could be done on that front. Some review, of course, has happened, but the idea is that can we make the plan a little more dynamic, actually able to reflect on what's happening on the ground and do some kind of course correction along the way. So evidence-based is what we need to move towards. We need to probably move towards a more inclusive kind of plan making, make it very, very outcome oriented, the entire plan framework, and dynamic if possible. Broadly, what do we mean by that? What we are essentially trying to do within the master plan is to create, number one, when we are saying evidence-based rather than norm-based, can we have a strong data framework to assess where we are, which is the baseline that we started doing, and hopefully this will get institutionalized as part of the regular planning process. Second is, if the city is actually beginning to move towards a more GIS-based spatial database, which will allow a lot of dynamic mapping of changes on the ground, etc. On the inclusivity front, we already changed the norm of citizens feeding into the thing by bringing them upfront into the planning process. I'll speak about it in a little more detail in the subsequent slides. We are hoping to build equity, gender sensitivity, and all ability kind of a framework as core principles within the plan. So while there are no separate chapters, Bombay, for instance, has targeted a separate chapter on gender. We feel constantly that these are underlying principles, and every chapter through its provisions will try and address some of these core principles. And lastly, like I said earlier also, one of the big dents we are hoping to make towards the inclusivity front is to make the document easy for people to read and decipher. It automatically, to some extent, solves the problem of, okay, so I don't understand the plan, somebody else needs to explain the plan to me, which kind of gets into a weird, complex kind of situation. When we are saying outcome oriented, what we are now beginning to move towards is the plan will actually set out long-term strategies and break those strategies down into short-term outcomes and a clear set of roadmaps, priorities, and projects. So the entire framework, we are hoping we can tie up through a KPI-based assessment framework rather than simply saying itne अस्पताल बन जाएंगे, itne रास्ते बन जाएंगे. We move towards a more outcome-oriented framework, that we will move towards walkability. How walkable did the city become? Can we measure that through some indices, through some assessment frameworks? That's going to be one big shift that we are hoping to make in the plan. And lastly, when we say dynamic, the big move that the plan hopes to make is move from monofunctional land use to mixed uses, flexible incentive-linked development instead of static regulatory plan making, a constant feedback loop with stakeholders. So the citizen engagement that we began now, we are hoping to institutionalize as part of the plan implementation process as well. Not just, it's not as if the citizen will now come back when the next plan is being thought of. So they should be a part of the entire plan implementation process throughout. And lastly, an action plan that allows for a close monitoring, a responsibility allocation to the various agencies, and course correction if possible. The way we've gone about making the plan is four big areas. We've done baselines, we've done expert inputs and case studies, we have done citizen engagement, and we've also brought on board several other stakeholders for consultation. Like I said, 6 or 7 major heads under which the work has happened, but there are certain core principles that we've constantly worked around: sustainability, resilience, equity, inclusivity, accessibility. Through these, what we are hoping to do is build a vision for Delhi, create an enabling policy framework, and develop a set of spatial strategies, all of which together form what we are calling the Master Plan 41. Just quickly run you through some of the work that we've done. On the baseline front, first of its kind effort has been made, where about 70 agencies, 150 plus departments were brought together, and data was really collated, just to see what is the quality and typology of data that is really being kept and maintained by agencies, and to see what comes out of that. Can we develop a kind of a status report for Delhi to understand what we must move towards? 10 reports have been put together. We are also trying to convert this into a digital datascape. Hopefully, we'll be able to put some of these numbers out within the public domain shortly. On the public engagement front, we've tried to engage with a diverse mix of people, not to say that RWAs matlab sirf RWAs ka ek ye kara. We try to separately have discussions with RWAs from formal colonies, RWAs from unauthorized colonies, RWAs from urban villages. Similarly, we've done meetings with youth of the city, actually sat down with them to figure that the youth feels is lacking in the city on various fronts, as a city for learning, because a lot of youth comes to the city to learn and be a part of higher education facilities. How do you actually improve publicness and vitality of the city? And lastly, how do they live and travel in Delhi? What are the difficulties they're facing? So things like that, very theme-based discussions across stakeholders were done. We are also trying, again, while this has been put out, it's still a work in progress. We are trying to put together a citizen engagement website that allows citizens to, yes, one, present their diagnosis of the city in terms of pain points, etc. But hopefully during the plan implementation process, so you might see a head called co-create on that dashboard. So co-create is where DDA or other service providing agencies might actually engage with citizens across the plan implementation process to get some of the new innovative ideas going, to plan for local areas and so on and so forth. So that's the website that's being put together. We also did a lot of casework, and the case studies were not so much city focused. So for instance, we didn't do a London case study or a Ahmedabad case study, etc. What we tried to do was focus on theme areas, which the master plan really wants to build on. So for instance, on the environment, we looked at river management strategies and how different cities have done it. So rather than taking a city case study approach, we've done what we are calling case study dossiers on 38 different theme areas. So each theme we've looked at multiple cities and the kind of initiatives that have gone into getting some of these themes really successful on ground. So to come to what is it that we're then, and again, I'm going to be very broad in my thing and leave the matter open for discussion later. So what is it that we're really attempting in the master plan? Like I said, these are the 3 big vision areas: environmental sustainability, livability, and economic and cultural vitality for the city. And this vision is going to be backed up by what we are calling 6 broad goal areas or the enabling policy areas. So number 1, and I think Meshram sir really pointed out, Meshram sir, Ashok sir, yourself, and also the Secretary General, all of you all really pointed out some of these in great detail when you all were speaking. So just to put it out again, 1, putting environment first. 2nd, fostering local economic development. How does a niche get created for Delhi? 3rd, celebrating heritage culture and public life. 4th, promoting high quality living, which is both housing as well as social infrastructure. 5th, moving towards low carbon mobility. Again, something that Meshram sir pointed out. How do you make the city more walkable, green mobility, etc. And 6th is really looking at developing resilient infrastructure. And the idea is that these 6 become the major policy areas, outcome areas for the city, backed up by 2 sets of strategies, the spatial strategies really. How do you catalyze urban regeneration, which is really the brownfield parts of the city? And how do you enable smart development of new areas? Again, like I said, very large tracts of urban land have been brought under urban now, and will likely be the major places where developments will happen going forward in the next 20 years. So how do you actually ensure good sustainable development in the new areas? So to take you back again, visions, the vision translated into goals, 6 goal areas, and which are backed up by the entire spatial strategy. This is actually, we are trying to design this, of course, is not finalized by any means. The entire master plan structure starts translating this into its chapterization. So we were probably, this is one of the first ideas that we are exploring right now, is that there could actually be 3 volumes to the master plan. The first volume is actually only setting out the baseline and really describing the big vision and the outcomes that the master plan wants to achieve as part of this, and what are the major shifts or the major strategic shifts that the master plan is trying to bring in. The second one is the enabling policy framework, which really will, the second volume, which really will be looking at these 6 policy areas that I just spoke about and detail out the strategies for that. Whereas volume 3 really is going to give you the brass tacks, in terms of development controls, actually kitna FAR kahan milega, kya kis zone mein kya apply hota hai, kaun se zone ko strategic mana ja raha hai, so on and so forth. So the entire spatial development strategy and action plan is being put down into volume 3. The idea we also had was that, from a citizen's perspective, from a layman's perspective, volumes 1 and 2 will give you a good sense of where the plan is heading, kis direction mein ja raha hai. Whereas from a developer's perspective or a person constructing his own home's perspective, volume 3 is good enough to actually read, because all of what you need to know in terms of approvals, in terms of how much FAR, if I'm a heritage property, what can I do, so on and so forth, will be available as part of volume 3. So that's really the structure that we're trying to work around. Very quickly, to run you through some of the strategic areas that are emerging for the big 6 that I presented. So for environment, for example, one of the things that we are hoping to ingrain into the master plan is move from an asset-based approach, where we are saying ek forest ko protect karo, ek nala ko protect karo, etc., to thinking about both existing environmental assets, ecological assets, as well as the built areas as a part of a green-blue continuum. The entire green-blue infrastructure of the city is becoming the approach to think about. So that continuum becomes important. So usme, of course, we will be talking about protecting and improving existing forests, building more citizen connect with the forests. River, it is a river city, and I think it's time we acknowledged it. We've really turned our back towards Yamuna, even as citizenry. And I think the river needs to be brought back into the imagination. तो उसके लिए बहुत सारा काम प्लान में हो रहा है. Rejuvenation of drain buffers as continuous city greens, as greenways that offer shortcuts, pedestrian and cycling shortcuts across the city is something that the plan will focus on. And also कुछ underutilized sites या wastelands हैं, quarries हैं, thermal power plants हैं, आपके landfills हैं. Can these slowly start becoming ecological assets for the city, and rather than remaining wastelands is going to be a focus. And lastly, built fabric. I think built fabric will play a major role. Like I said, a large part of the greenhouse emissions and the heating and power guzzling problem actually comes from insensitive built areas. So, greening of built fabric in terms of urban greening factors and ideas like that for facilitating green roofs, etc., is something that we are going to do as part of the master plan. On the local economic development front, Delhi has constantly over the past 2 plans spoken of moving towards clean economies, manufacturing moving out. But how does one actually get this done? Because what is happening is some of the bigger clean economies, which could have given Delhi a lot of economic vitality, like IT, ITES, etc., are actually settling in places like Gurgaon. Gurgaon or others. Now, how do you bring some of these economies back into the city, make the city more vibrant in terms of the clean economy front is something that we hope to do as a part of this plan. And for this, a lot of strategic hubs and corridors, a limited number, of course, but strategic hubs and corridors are going to be identified, which also becomes a filter through which the redevelopment strategies will be designed. Then the city is increasingly going to move towards green economy, create a value chain of city level green farming, green agriculture, Z farming. इस तरीके की चीजों को बढ़ावा दिया जाएगा as part of the plan. Of course, it remains a trade and commerce hub. So how do you actually continue with that, but move towards again decongesting and cleaning? Where can wholesale and warehousing, again something that's been spoken of, but how do you actually action it is something this plan is really working on. And lastly, not not to delegate this to the this के unorganized sector, which is a fairly large proportion of the city, इसके लिए कैसे काम होगा? So work integration into affordable housing or slum rehab schemes, looking at facilities, better design of things like labor chalks, vending zones, multi-utility zones, so on and so forth. बहुत सारी इस तरीके की चीजों पे भी ध्यान दिया जाएगा as part of the plan. Heritage culture and public life, again, heritage has been, I hope I'm not exceeding time. Hello?
Nilesh, how much time you want more?
I think I'll take another 10 minutes. I'll try and finish in another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Would that be okay?
Okay.
Okay. So on the culture side also, while a lot of the heritage assets, etc., have been identified, strategies for actually developing cultural precincts and making them better attractions, etc., has not been done. And similarly, public areas, Delhi badi public city hai, lekin public areas are often found unsafe to the extent that nightlife is something that's heavily compromised, and that's again something that we want to reintroduce into the plan framework. High quality live-in, a big focus of this plan is going to be on non-ownership housing, rental housing formats, affordable housing because what we are also realizing is affordable housing, given the land costs, becomes a bit of a misnomer in the middle of the city unless some kind of subsidy is brought in or land costs are really taken out of the equation. Now, one way of doing that is to really look at non-ownership formats, rental formats, and look at the entire spectrum, all the way from dormitories, dormitory accommodations, very short-term accommodations as to rental spaces, and all the way to serviced apartments perhaps. But look at a kind of a rental framework that allows migrants who are entering the city to get good quality housing in the city. Encouraging mixed use, of course, is a big one, by which we may be able to bring homes and work closer together. To one of the things about COVID that constantly comes up is how do you successfully cordon off areas or create smaller isolation areas? Complete neighborhoods might be one of the ways in which to do that. Again, on social infrastructure side, particularly for brownfield areas, one of the big moves that is being made is that rather than just making land-based allocations, social infra can now be flexibly inserted as mixed use into the FAR logic as part of built-up space. So वो भी एक change ला रहे हैं. Green mobility, already there is a policy on walkability that's been introduced by DDA, but this will be one of the major focus areas, and walk plans will become a part of every layout that will be approved as part of the master plan going forward. TOD is a policy that's already there, but a more sharper policy will be a part of 41. We are also trying to identify certain strategic mobility corridors, for freight movements, trans-river connectivity, bypasses agar kahin required hain, so on and so forth, which can aid the city and reduce the congestion that we have on the roads right now. A lot of softer initiatives to move from private to public transport are going to be a part of this. And importantly, rationalization of parking throughout the city, where the parking norms will be linked to public transport accessibility levels. We are already working with DIMS to create a PTAL model for Delhi, and parking will be linked to things like that. And of course, supporting low carbon technologies through infrastructure within buildings as well as public spaces is something that will be there in the plan. On the infrastructure side, again, water becomes very critical. So integrated water management, where storm water, wastewater, and water supply in general are going to be brought together under an integrated water management framework to see how we can work around that. Also, digital infrastructure is something that we want to focus on a big way, because that is the way forward, and it can help both governance as well as a lot of other things on the ground. And of course, resilience. And a lot of thought is going into how do you make infrastructure in the city resilient, really. I'm not going to spend too much time on what the exact things are, but broadly, urban region, agar land policy for Delhi dekhein, to ek single land policy nahi hai. There are 3 or 4 buckets in which it's being done. Okay, greenfield development through land pooling bhi hai, low intensity development areas hain, jaise green belt, etc. Unke liye policies alag hain. Urban regeneration is being thought as a separate set of buckets. कई सारे buckets हैं जिनमें nuanced regeneration approaches लिए जा रहे हैं. And of course, you're looking at undeveloped land pockets in the city, jinke liye plan ban raha hai. I'm running through some of these and just getting you. So on the monitoring side also, one of the ideas is that to make it an outcome-based approach, visions will be supported through what I showed you, the 6 goals, but each of the 6 goals will actually be translated into clear outcomes and supported by measurable KPIs. The idea being that these will actually give you some kind of indexes that you can monitor, which actually link back to the vision. So the entire monitoring framework is going to revolve around measuring larger key performance indicators that that DDA will take on the responsibility of really measuring over time. And how does one really do it? So on the right hand side, if you see the monitoring ka right hand side, there will be data protocols that will be set up. Right now in the baseline, we realize that data हर तरीके का हर format में capture हो रहा है. But what is it that we want to measure? Can agencies be asked to measure and keep that data in that format and submit that data as part of the planning overall, as part of an overall planning corpus of data to DDA? And so therefore, can that data protocol be set up? Could we have coordination workshops where every year where agencies come together and sit down and deliberate where we are not doing anything, kahan pe kaam ho raha hai, course correction karne ki requirement hai ya nahi hai? Of course, there would be monitoring committees under the LG and VC to take the stock of what's happening. But importantly, they would also, DDA will also gear up slowly to do stakeholder facilitation, because it's moving into the role of a facilitator to see whether citizens, other stakeholders can be actively facilitated through guidelines, through hand-holding, technical support, and so on and so forth, to actually make plans and improvements at their level. So yeah, that's broadly where I will close in the interest of time. And yeah, we can discuss some of these things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nilesh. This is a very good presentation. You have flagged a lot of issues. On principle, it looks very good, but the devil is in the detail. So we will see how it unfolds over the next 2-3 months. I have a number of questions, and I'm sure our attendees have a lot of questions to ask. We will provide that opportunity. As far as possible, we will invite people to give their feedback. But before doing that, I want to invite now the only panelist that we have, Professor Dr. Poonam Prakash. She is a professor in the School of Planning and Architecture. She is also a trained architect and a planner with specialization in housing from School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi. She also secured her PhD from Delhi School of Planning and Architecture. She has a very focused kind of experience she's constantly engaged with the master plan, particularly master plan of Delhi. She responds to whatever changes take place in the master plan on a very regular basis. I would suggest she is a master plan watcher who keeps on looking at master plan very constantly and responds to in whatever way that it is possible. So with these few words of introduction, let me now request Professor Poonam Prakash she has 2 tasks in my view to perform today in the next 15 minutes. One is to, if she wants to flag some points from Nilesh's presentation, she can do that, or make her own additional points. So over to Professor Poonam.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ashok Kumar, and thank you to also Delhi Regional Chapter for giving me this opportunity to be able to really share some of my experiences and thoughts on Delhi Master Plan. I understand that it is a really complex exercise, and I know what a humongous task it is to prepare a plan for a city like Delhi, which is so complex. And I am, and what Nilesh has shared in a very comprehensive way is how they are going to make plans respond to some of the challenges that we are facing. I'm going to focus more on processes, some of the processes that are unfolding, and with the assumption that if we look at the processes, we perhaps will have more responsive plans. So that is what I'm going to try to do quickly through my presentation. And I'll just share my presentation with you. All right, so just before I start my presentation, I just wanted to give you, Dr. Shok has already mentioned, but I'll just kind of give you what has been my, where am I coming from? So many of you may know that I very briefly worked in DDA for about a year and a half. Over the last 15 years, we have kind of, in a very focused way, undertaken studio projects and thesis, which kind of directly, yeah.
Could you convert this to slideshow, please?
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, all right. So one of our studio reports was presented in one of the court cases in 2006. We had in 2002-1, we were part of a citizen engagement series for master plan, and I was also part of the master plan implementation support group during 2021. So these are some of the, and I have, as Dr. Shokumar mentioned, I have been engaging with public notice processes, and I may have responded to almost more than 100 public notices since 2002. So I'm going to just share some of those experiences, and also because I see there is much less focus on the processes. So I am hoping that this will initiate discussions around some of the processes that are unfolding. As has been mentioned, the challenges by Professor Meshram also and Nilesh also, that we are seeing these challenges, and particularly, so one is of course despite our interventions, we see that we see that there is a rising pollution. This is a PM10 data, and from 2006 onwards to 2018, if we see that there is a major increase. Similarly, the other challenge, there are many challenges, but I'm just kind of making a point that there is this whole challenge of rising number of substandard housing. In 1977, we had 597 unauthorized colonies, and we said, okay, no more, we are just going to regularize these. In 1993, we had that number to 1,071, and we said, okay, no more. And now in 2017, that regularization process that we have started, we have that number to 1,797. And we have almost, according to the economic survey, we have almost 33% of the population which is living outside the formal planning system. And my sense is it will be much more actually, but just to go with the government figures right now. And we kind of term some of these self-organized settlements as encroachers, and we will come to this in a while. So now, how do we respond? There are many other challenges of mobility, of open spaces and all, but the question then is, how are we kind of responding to this? So if you look at the very, very literal meaning of being responsive, it is basically paying attention to somebody, something, and reacting to it in an appropriate or positive way. So the question now here is, what is appropriate and what is positive? I think this was also flagged, this was also commented by Professor Meshram, that, okay, what are we responding to? And how are we responding? So I think this is critical. So I've kind of looked at it from two ways. One is that how are we responding to change? How responsive are we to change? And what is changing? So I'm saying it that we can look at it in two ways. One is, how do we anticipate change? And preparing a plan is a process of anticipating change. And we do that through making land allocations, making norms and standards, having zoning regulations. These are the key components of any plan, this thing. And we would then go on further to see how we are anticipating change. And the second is, what is the mechanism we have of discerning change? And plan monitoring is an activity that kind of discerns change. So how responsive are to that? So that is one thing that I'm going to look at. Second thing I'm going to look at is how responsive are we as when we are preparing these plans to people. So that basically means how are we addressing the issues of inclusion? How do we recognize competing interests? And what is the process through which participation is happening? Nilesh has talked about this. 2041 has actually widespread consultations, but we would kind of look at, how we could do it in a manner which is responsive to people. So when I began to think about today's talk, and I thought, okay, let me look at what would I call a responsive change and what would I call a non-responsive change. And so when I tried to kind of look at my experience, so I've kind of given examples of one which I think is perhaps a reason. I won't say really a responsive change, but I would say a reasonably responsive change, then an example of a non-responsive change, and then an example of forced change. So I'm looking at, if I look at 2001 plan and I look at the allocational provisions, and when I'm saying responsive change, I'm going with an assumption that we need to look at, there is an assumption that richer sections of the society have the capacities to look after themselves in variety of situations, which means our responsibility then is to see how weaker sections of the society how do we respond to them as planned. And I think there has to be a explicit commitment for that in planning. So if I look at these three components of allocation, norms and standards, and zoning regulations, I would say it was a reasonably responsive change. Also in terms of informal sector, where Delhi Master Plan in 2001 was the first plan which had a very explicit provisions for informal sector. In case of EWS and LIG, the language, the way it framed the language and the way it talked about community integration of the poor at 1 lakh, it was talking about plotted housing for the poor, which is, I think, in terms of, if we look at it as a plan, as an allocational document, as a document which is allocating land as a resource, then I think we need to look at whom are we distributing how much. And so I think in that sense, I thought that 2021 also did a lot of other things, which in terms of rationalizing densities, having, Master Plan 62 had differential standards, which 2001 plan kind of did away with. It had same norms and standards for all the citizens, with some change, some variation for some resettlement schemes, but by and large it had same norms. And it kind of it also had made provisions for household industry. So it did these. So I would say that it kind of had a more egalitarian response to what was happening. It introduced the chapter on environment. So I kind of categorized it as a reasonably responsive change. If I come to now, we are talking about, there is as Nilesh is pointing out, so this was the vision of 2021, so it was to make Delhi a global metropolis and a world-class city, where and I think there is nothing wrong with this vision. I mean, it's a reasonably okay vision, and it further goes on to say, particularly for housing, that it will make provision for So it will make provision of adequate housing, particularly for the weaker sections of the society, addressing the problems of small enterprises, particularly in the unorganized informal sector. So it did make that as part of its first, vision, a commitment to that. But however, when we look at the details, I would consider planning Master Plan 2021 a more it was non-responsive. It responded a lot to market forces over a period of time, if you look the way plans have changed now. And I would say it was non-responsive to weaker sections. Why do I say that? It diluted the low-income housing provisions. And how did it do that? For example, the category of EWS as a category was removed. We had 1 room, 2 room, 3 room, which made it more difficult now to monitor how much will get really, be delivered to EWS category. There was, in most of the public notices that I attended, most of the developers, and even for that matter, CPWD, like Kidwai Nagar, the initial provisions in the master plan were to have 15% FAR for EWS in all group housing projects. Now, there was a plan modification, CPWD comes in and says that, for us, you should remove this provision. So now most of the government land that is going to be redeveloped in group housing will not have an EWS housing provision, which is not the case in many other cities that I'm familiar with. For example, Chandigarh Housing Board, if they do their own housing, they are supposed to provide 15% EWS. But in Delhi, we modified the plan and we did away with that provision of EWS housing. In land pooling, also there was a provision of 15% housing. However, the developers came and said, let's combine it as part of the servant quarter. So it will be an EWS housing. However, it will get allocated to higher income groups. Then we did this low density residential area, which regularized farmhouses. And I'm not kind of, and I understand that it is not just planners. I'm seeing planning as a coordinated activity of planning, implementation, enforcement with intricacies of political processes, economic processes. So I think it is important for us to talk about these processes because if we don't, then we kind of have these grand aspirations, but on ground something completely different unfolds. Community module integration, which was there in 2001 plan, which was a good idea, but however, it never kind of got on ground. Norms and standards was one of the major changes that we made. We had significantly differential norms and standards. As we see that we already have almost 33% to 50% of our population living in substandard housing. And for all those, like urban villages, unauthorized resettlement, we had significantly lower standards in terms of education, health, open spaces. Now, that means that we create a city which has 2 different kinds of citizenship. And that I think, as city planners, we really need to look at. Zoning regulations for EWS, we had densities which are going up to 900 DUs per hectare, which is, I think we really, and considering what earlier in the introductory remarks was said, looking at the COVID and other this thing, I think we really need to look at some of these. And this I'm not going to spend, but if we look at the way text is structured in 2021 plan, one gets a sense of, it is framed in a way of more as a negative phenomena, but I'll come to this in a while. Okay, so I'm just going to take this illustrative example of residential, which, the reason I say, I mentioned earlier that, we are framing them as encroachers, and I want to just kind of look at this frame of, encroachers. And, we made a plan allocation. We said that by 2021, 230 lakh people will be coming to Delhi, and we planned for 230 lakh. I don't think the 2011 census showed much less population than we had projected. And 24 lakh new housing units were to be developed. Now, which means that we had anticipated a certain kind of population. However, we haven't developed any of the urban extension areas by 2021. So, in zone J, land pooling, nothing has come in. In zone J, the land which was supposed to have been developed has been now regularized for farmhouses. Now, considering that we had made land allocations in our plan, and we haven't developed by 2021 as we said we would, people have come into the city and they have found their own solutions. So should we be calling them encroachers, or should we be considering them as implementation backlog? Now, the thing is that we've made them as violators of law. And but I think we also need to look at the other side of the story, that which means that if we have these grand aspirations, they have to be seen in terms of the institutional and implementation capacities. So in plans, maybe the plans like, there is this whole general argument that we have to keep improving the plans. I'm saying that implementation and enforcement issues cannot be addressed by planning solutions alone. So let's be careful which are the planning issues, which are the implementation issues, and which are the enforcement issues, rather than, putting everything, assuming that everything a plan document will be in a position to do. This is some of things that I've taken from the DDA website. This is the achievements that they say. They say we have developed a land of 27,600 hectares of land. It may not be an updated data, but let's look at what we haven't done, right? 11,000 hectares almost, which was supposed to have been developed by Zone L by 2021, hasn't happened. Similarly, if you will take the case of other urban extension areas, that hasn't happened because land pooling is just about unfolding. So I think we need to accommodate for system delays. So it can't be that today we have notified the plan and next day things are going to happen. That's not going to happen. If we look at it as a system, there are going to be system delays and people are going to come in. So how do we want to look at people who have come in because we ourselves said in the plan that they will come in? So this is as far as your responsive, anticipating change. So if we are anticipating change, but if we don't have the institutional capacities to really be able to provide for them, then how do we move forward is something that I think plan should look at. Then is the responsive to change in terms of discerning change. What is the mechanism? Nilesh did talk about plan monitoring. What is, so discerning change is plan monitoring. And so now Delhi Master Plan talks about plan monitoring as an essential mechanism which will make plan responsive to the emerging socioeconomic forces. This is, I'm taking from Delhi Master Plan, what it says about monitoring, and it has a very elaborate monitoring mechanism. It talked about monitoring indicators at two levels, not just the physical development targets. It had physical development targets and it monitored socioeconomic change. And it also had 17, I think, monitoring groups. Now, that has not happened. So I think instead of saying that can we improve on the existing monitoring system, I think we have a fairly robust, at least in the plan, it was a good monitoring system. Can we just roll it on the ground? So once we do that, I think that perhaps should be. So I'm just going to give another illustrative example as to how this monitoring becomes. Yeah.
Can you wind up in another 5 minutes?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I don't have much after this. Okay, so this is DDA says on its website that they have done 9 district centers, 36 commercial centers, 134 local shopping center, and 440. Against, they were supposed to have done 46, 230 community centers, 2,300 and 4,600 convenience shopping center as per their norms and standards. Now, I'm not saying this was the only reason, the factors which led to proliferation of commercial shops in residential areas. And the way we responded to it is, of course, traders then now. So earlier we had, people living in residential settlements as violators of law. Now we have traders also who've been forced to become violators of law. And we then, for the first time now, acknowledge that we can, do regularization as a process for change. Whatever change is happening, we are unable to keep pace with it. We will now regularize. So as a dominant made of accommodating change, I think this is a process that we need to acknowledge and see what we want to do about it. Now I come to the last bit, which is about responsive to people. How responsive are we to people? This is, we look at, there is a public notice process. And there are two components to it. One is the information dissemination. And this is how we disseminate information about the public notice and about the housing development sub-DDA. So I think we need to look at the way we are telling people to engage in the cities. Of course, in 2041, there has been much wider publicity, but I think the statutory processes also need to be given as much importance. The main problem in being responsive to participation is that I'll just skip this. This is just, I'm just telling you what happened during mass. Who are we responding to basically? So we are basically responding to the proposals that are arising from the ministry. We are responding to court judgments in a certain way. And we are responding to developers and property owners who may be already negotiating in other arenas. So, okay. Now, so I'll just kind of sum up by saying that what DMP 2041 should do. So first is it should acknowledge the gap between aspirations and institutional capacities and provide an assessment of achievements and constraints from the previous plan. What we were not able to do and why, for us to really be able to take corrective actions. We should identify implementation and enforcement issues separately and distinct, which can't be resolved through plan modifications. We should develop different scenarios. We should say if our enforcement and implementation is weak, then there will be slums and there will be substandard housing and there will be higher pollution. Because if we don't have the shared goals as a city, I think it is impractical to really expect that ideal scenario will unfold. It won't. We need to give accountability of previous land allocations for the poor, because we made certain commitments in previous plans and we want to know what happened to those, and we should have clear allocations for the poor in this plan. As far as being responsive to people, we need to explicitly identify competing interests. For example, traders have their own interest, developers have their own interest, and the poor will have their interest. And we need to make explicit commitment to prioritize vulnerable and marginalized groups, and then have a mechanism of considerations of various objection suggestions that come in as per the Act. So I sum up here. Thank you so much.
Professor Poonam Prakash, for this very detailed presentation. I will postpone my questions and open the house for their feedback, reactions to both presentations. Anyone can come in, please. How do we see who is coming?
Panelist
if no one is coming, perhaps I can start with my comment, and others can have their questions a little later. Nilesh has made a comprehensive presentation and flagged principles of inclusivity, gender sensitivity, and various other market-related principles. When we come to details, I find very little addition. How to operationalize, for example, inclusivity in the detailed planning proposals. Because these Poonam's presentation and your presentation depends on the perspective. They run really parallel. She has focused more on how to address issues faced by economically weaker sections, and your presentation, which is more oriented towards market principles. I think both presentations have their own value, and if we could marry these principles in a manner which strikes a kind of balance between economic development as well as achieving SDG 1, which is end poverty in all its forms. And we do some kind of justice to the people who are resettled on the peripheries of the city without provision of services, or with very little provision of services, or we demolish slums in the city and redevelop. We have started this exercise now. And Nilesh, first, perhaps you can go first and respond. And please keep your answers a little brief. I have gone little comprehensive in my question itself. So if you can keep your questions and answers brief, that will help, because more people can participate.
Yeah. So I completely appreciate the concerns around. So first of all, one of the things that happens with presentations like what I did today is the ability to present a very detailed document in such a short time. So I've completely skirted any detail in my presentation, but a lot of thought is going into writing of the chapters. A lot of thought is going into trying to ensure that we bring in enough provisions that allow some kind of inclusivity to come into play. Take example to give you. DDA is increasingly, in fact, moving towards becoming a facilitator in terms of housing provision, in terms of area planning, and so on and so forth. And increasingly, the role is being shifted to the market players, the developers. Now, how do you? So what's going to happen is, what's going to be very critical in the plan is to find ways in which we can ensure some kind of affordable housing agar le le, then I think the way in which one can do that in a scenario where market is going to be depended on for creating most of the housing, etc. That how do you actually incentivize or regulate some of these things? जैसे पूनम जी कह रही थी कि वो 15% EWS का जो प्रावधान है. Now, can that EWS logic itself, number one, be explored fully? Because yes, there are real questions, and again, I don't think I can answer these fully because DDA may have to take a call on some of these ideas, and perhaps if Leenu ma'am was here, she could have answered it better. But how do you? There are issues regarding 50% EWS jo service personnel ke liye hai. How do you actually ensure that they go to EWS? So there are regulatory enforcement issues around things like that. But our concern when we were thinking about the inclusivity aspect was to take it a little beyond that. Is that, let us for a moment assume that EWS is coming back and that EWS housing is being created. Can one also begin to rethink the formats? Can one expand the envelope of the EWS FAR itself to look at shorter tenures? Because one of the things that came up very strongly during the entire migrant issue is that tenures themselves vary from people wanting to settle for a long time to people who are coming for very short term. So there are people who are coming into the city for servicing air conditioners, etc., and who are going back to their villages to take up agriculture during the remaining year. So there are very short tenure migration that is also happening to the city. And how do you get the private sector or ensure that the market is able to facilitate housing that actually meets some of these is going to be the big concern for us. And really all our focus, and again, I have no answers per se to offer. We're really working hard on trying to get this entire framework going. But the idea is to see if we are moving from a provider to a facilitator role. How do you ensure that the market continues to meet some of your bigger social goals? So I'm not sure if I answered it, but what you're saying is definitely a concern for us also. I do not disagree on that. But honestly, we're still working on this, on the details of how to get this done, sir.
Sir, with permission of chair, can I ask you something? Nilesh? Nilesh?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what Delhi MPD 2041 is going to propose in terms of pandemic? Because today it's COVID-19, tomorrow it will be something else. As you know, especially in towards health infrastructure, health infrastructure. Because we have a norms of 3 doctors per population as of now. So what are the changes you are going to propose in MPD 2041?
Well, several things are being looked at simultaneously. The thing is that the pandemic has brought into question a lot of planning paradigms that we otherwise took for granted. They say mass transport is something that we always took for granted, but abhi ho ye raha hai ke, people are actually moving back to private vehicles because of the fear of the pandemic, etc. So a lot of good planning practices are also coming under question. So बहुत सारे fronts पे pandemic को address करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. Number one, if one has to think of private modes and isolated modes of movement, then perhaps walking and cycling become very, very critical. So the city is gearing up to improving both these infrastructures in a big way. Second is, again, the whole migrant issue that came up, and therefore my response to Ashok Kumar sir also is that a lot of focus on multiple short and long tenure non-ownership housing formats in the city. Government of India has already come up with the ARHC, which provides a big kind of fundamental support to cities like Delhi to take this up also. So it's not like we have to propose this in an environment where nobody is convinced about it. I think the national government is also pushing that envelope. So usko karna hai. Health is not the only, actually what we are saying is that social infrastructure में सबसे बड़ा issue ये रहा है constantly with Delhi is all our norms, क्योंकि हम हमेशा greenfield development करते थे. If we understand Delhi well, हमने हमेशा land acquire किया, उसकी planning करी और हर चीज के लिए land allocate किया. अस्पताल के लिए करा, स्कूलों के लिए करा, हर चीज के लिए एक अलग land allocate करा. But what happens in a brownfield circumstance, and most of Delhi is now brownfield, what happens in brownfield is उस तरीके की open ज़मीनें अब available नहीं है. Densities are going up, ज़मीनें available नहीं है. How do you craft this out is becoming a question. So one of the big moves to answer your question that we are doing is we are facilitating social infrastructure to be provided also as a part of build space, not just creating new land areas for it, but build space, vertical mixing allow करेंगे, build space के अंदर mixing allow हो जाएगी. तो of course उसमें भी regulations and norms होंगे, but you will find that more and more medical facilities and other facilities can come within neighborhoods जहाँ पे ये नहीं है, and वो अटकेंगे नहीं क्योंकि land available नहीं है, वो built area के अंदर भी आ सकती है.
नीलेश जी, next question ले लेते हैं.
जी सर.
Mr. Jeet Kumar Gupta ji has a question. He is from Punjab chapter. He is from Punjab chapter. I am very happy that inter-chapter interactions are also taking place. Mr. Jeet Kumar Gupta, please. जीत कुमार गुप्ता जी, आप हैं?
एंट्री तो भी ना, इमरान तो बोले.
हेलो.
हाँ जी, हाँ जी
सर, मैं ऑडिबल हूँ कि नहीं?
Yes,
पूरा जी, बिल्कुल.
Thank you, sir. I think these two are very wonderful presentation showing a roadmap of what Delhi is going to be. But I think what I was missing, that the presentation never talked about Delhi in the regional context. All the master plan have talked about Delhi in the regional context, and all the presentation made was they were looking more inclusive in Delhi itself. Will the new kind of master plan will be beyond the contours defined in the NCR plan? I think that needs to be addressed, and I think the entire context has to be seen, number one, in the region, number one. Number two, I think we have to look for new kind of systems. Why can't we, as a planner, we are trying to give a vision. Why can't we have a Delhi looked at a cooperative city? Let's say a city which is owned by all its citizens. There are no elites, etc. So that, city is based on a partnership. Third, I would say, I think rather than looking outward, Delhi must look inward. Why can't we look at the strategy that land is looked 24/7 by 365, rather than we say for 10,000 people, there is going to be high school, why that high school cannot be run in 2 shifts, so that you have, you save land, number one. Number two, we would like the new ideas to come in. That is, Delhi must be made a green city. That roadmap must be there. Number three, in order to conserve land. India has only 2.4% land and 17.3% population. I think land is not a commodity. Let's look inward, let's recycle. And I would suggest, why can't the master plan give a vision? Delhi be converted into flatter development rather than a plateau where people have a large area. So these are the few ideas I would like to suggest and add, that if they could be also considered as part of the master plan. Thank you, sir.
Sir, can I respond to this?
Thank you, sir. I don't think there is a question. He has given some suggestions, so we can take those up at appropriate time. Miss Samita Singh is there. She wants to ask a question or make a statement. Samita Singh. Hello. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
She's saying she's not audible. If you can read out her question.
I don't have that reading out facility. Smita Singh, can you read the question there? Chat box में देखो. In the meanwhile, if I can ask Mr. Srinivas from TCPO, if he can ask the question. Srinivas ji, आप हैं?
आवाज नहीं आ रहा यार उसको. उसका आवाज नहीं आ रहा अशोक जी का.
उनका म्यूट.
Smita, shall I read Smita's question? Smita ka comment.
If you can read, yeah.
Okay. So she's written, also from being responsive, the government also needs to move towards being responsible. For example, in a private sector-led planning and development model, the government needs to retain responsibility for vulnerable groups and planning aspects.
Okay. Miss Vibhuti Raina, is she there? You want to ask a question? Vibhuti Raina? No. Mr. Srinivas from TCPO?
Yes, Smita has another one. Okay.
Unmute your mic.
JK, unmute your mic.
JK का आवाज नहीं आ रही. JK, can you hear us?
Please kindly see my question in the chat box. I will request Nilesh to kindly answer. I have already told.
We cannot do that.
This
Can
is
you
regarding
ask the question?
This is regarding carrying capacity.
Yes, sir.
This is regarding carrying capacity can mean so many things. So I will go to the next person, Mr. Sujit Rotge.
Okay.
Mr. Sujit Rotge. Mr. Sujit Rotge, no.
No problem. अभी मैं वेबिनार में हूँ
Mr. Srinivas is asking a question, Nilesh ji, Poonam, about capacity building. I will give to Nilesh first. What is your? He has not given me a full question. But he is carrying capacity. Carrying capacity. So if you can, of land. carrying capacity of land he wants to talk about. Nilesh, can you briefly respond? Please briefly respond to this.
I will try and answer this. Srinivas sir, carrying capacity, जैसे अशोक सर ने mention किया, इसके कई सारे मायने हो सकते हैं. I don't think at any point we can say that इस शहर में और लोग नहीं बस पाएंगे. I think that's a part of a very different logic. But what we are doing and we are trying to connect to is, for example, पानी. पानी is something जो particularly for Delhi बहुत limited supply में है. So in terms of allocation of FAR, in terms of which are the areas जहाँ पे intensification बहुत high होगा, इनको काफी हद तक हम limit कर रहे हैं, and we are focusing only on the strategic areas just right now. So I think at some point we will have to take a call on शहर में जो बड़े outcomes हम चाहते हैं, उनको करने के लिए क्या minimum interventions हम कर सकते हैं. But the other thing about whether people will continue to enter the city is something I guess will happen with most of our urban areas. I don't know if we can. There is also the other problem is that कुछ areas में already density, जैसे unauthorized colonies है, density far exceeds master plan already imagined.
Yes.
So in areas में sir, as we are all aware, there is no way so many people, and like Poonam ji pointed out, they, ये एक housing solution लोगों ने निकाला था. This is not, whether we think about this as unauthorization is a big question mark. लेकिन इनको अब de-densify नहीं करा जा सकता. Those number of people will stay there, and places like Hong Kong probably live with densities almost 1.5 times what's there in the unauthorized colony also. So I think it's a question of how do you tackle densities by ensuring good norms that allow them to improve over time. जैसे land नहीं है तो build space के अंदर facilities allow कर दे. जब भी redevelopment होगा कुछ छोटे शहर के लिए वापस ओपन स्पेसेस आप ले लें. इस तरीके से एक जिसको कहते हैं ना कंजर्वेटिव सर्जरी के थ्रू हम शायद इन एरियाज को ठीक कर पाएंगे.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Nilesh. Thank you. We will further discuss on this matter.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Poonam?
I think carrying capacity वाला concern तो valid है, but when we say कि हम de-densify नहीं कर सकते हैं, या I don't know, मतलब we would perhaps need to figure out. I think the master plan offers redevelopment options and infrastructure upgradation options, but वो किस तरीके से होगा, I think that is something we need to figure out.
Table 1 of MPD 2021 is very important. That's what I have written, that it has to be revisited.
नहीं श्रीनिवास, that table 2021 का 2001 का table है जो उन्होंने 2021 में लिया है. For example, if you look at zone E holding capacity and zone E population, they haven't done anything which will say that we are going to upgrade the holding capacity. What we can do is, we like in zone E, we need to have infrastructure upgradation for the holding capacity to increase. If we don't have that, then so we need to accept that अगर हम ये चीज नहीं करेंगे तो there are consequences to that. If we are not going to upgrade the infrastructure, people are going to live in poor hygienic conditions, and we are going to have consequences everybody is going to face. So we can't shy away by saying कि holding capacity तो हमारी उतनी रहेगी, population कितनी भी आ जाए. That's not a position, that's not a realistic, in my opinion, that's not really the way we should be looking at things, frankly.
No,
Thank you, Poonam.
I hope my answer wasn't misconstrued as that, because that's not what I was saying at all. I was in fact saying that you cannot move people out of just zones.
I know. This is not in response to you. Yeah, this is not a response to you. But generally, I'm
capacity को notch up करना पड़ेगा.
मतलब 2021 में नहीं किया था उन्होंने, 2001 वाली ही होल्डिंग कैपेसिटी 2021 में रिपीट हो गई थी. That is what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay. The key speakers, can I add my perspective to this carrying capacity idea? I have always taken a very different view on this capacity idea. I don't think this is really something to do with it may have some link with carrying capacity also, but more than that, and majorly I think this is a distributional question You may have a lot of housing stock available even in the low income category, but if it is not appropriately distributed, or we don't create conditions for people to buy from the marketplace the existing housing stock in the low income group category or in EWS category. First of all, production itself is low, but even if it is adequate, let's assume it is adequate, then perhaps distributional issues will have to be addressed also. We still have another 5 minutes, so if you want to ask questions, please speak. Because this television is far away from us, so we can't see your written question. If you have feedback, particularly for Nilesh, then we would like to have that.
क्या मैं पूछ सकता हूँ what is the population they are projecting for 2041 for Delhi?
हाँ जी, पूछ सकते हैं जी, बिल्कुल पूछ। नीलेश जी बताइए।
जी सर, we're estimating somewhere between 28 to 30 million, but those numbers are yet to be confirmed. But just going by population, just going by the standard population modeling, those are the kind of numbers that the modeling throws up based on trends.
Is it NCR population or Delhi exclusive?
No. Delhi का ही अगर trend देखें,
NCR का तो 20 million से पहले ज्यादा है जी।
नहीं, 3.25 million
Delhi population.
UNO ने 32.5 million किया है by the year 2050. When this was the second largest city in the world. That's a UNO projection, but a NCR projection. Not this.
UNO का Delhi urban agglomeration का projection actually says that it will Tokyo को exceed कर जाएगा by 2027.
But that takes into account all the areas, na?
All the areas is the urban agglomeration, is the larger urban agglomeration.
Noida, everything.
Yeah.
That is that projection, right?
Yes.
Okay, guys, if there are no further questions, we will stop discussion here. The webinar comes to an end, but before we close, I want to make a brief comment, and then I will hand over to our secretary. DRC will extend a vote of thanks, but I just want to make a brief comment, and this is intended as a kind of backdrop to what is happening in the form of a revision of master plan. Delhi master plan has a very glorious plan making process, has a very glorious history. As we all know, the experiments started here with the efforts of the TCPO, and then foreign planners came in, and in my view, they addressed the housing question rather very deeply and in a more equitable way. If we look at the allocations they made for lower income groups, particularly. Ji, sir. And those entitlements got reduced over a period of time as we Indians made plans. I think that idea needs to be revisited. Why in the first place we are reducing those entitlements? If we treat all as our citizens, equal citizens, then perhaps we need to revisit this idea of entitlements, and Article 21 of the Constitution clearly, all of us know this is not something new that I'm saying. Article 21 of the Constitution provides this, and it is also said now that the kind of housing that you provide has to be not only housing like animal existence, but some kind of dignified habitat where families live. It's not mere provision that the Constitution is talking about, particularly Article 21. A second point on plan making process, I think it is in almost all documents that we prepare nowadays that we provide a kind of, we do include ideas like inclusivity, ideas like that we care for the poor. But then when it comes to detailing out these ideas and operationalizing these ideas, then those ideas are somehow not carried through throughout even not the text of the plan. So we always say something in our objectives, in principles, highlight that stuff, and then we don't pursue it even in the text of the plan, forget about implementation of those policies. And the point which really hugely important aspect of planning, and we somehow sidestep or ignore that idea. The policies like redevelopment, in-situ redevelopment, and resettlement of slum dwellers outside of the peripheries of the city, that group of population may not be in majority in the city, but if we treat them as citizens according to our constitution, yesterday we celebrated Constitution Day. If we really have to implement principles of our constitution, then perhaps we need to really have a relook at policies like resettlement policies and in situ redevelopment. I think it is important. And Professor Rao has switched on his video. So I would like to request him if he has a view on this, because he comes from housing department. He is our director at the moment, but originally comes from housing department. He specializes in this subject. So Professor Rao, I will give you floor for a brief period of time.
Thank you, Professor Ashok Kumar. I am a town planner first. Housing is only one of those areas in which I dabble in. There are other areas also in which I work. I have 5 points to make, and I will make them very quickly as we are almost coming to the fag end. The first point that I would like to make is that often there is a perception amongst the planners and the other people who are associated with plan making, plan implementation, and so on, is that the master plan is a panacea for all the urban ills. And therefore, every time there's a little bit of water that's not getting down into the drain, every time there are a few people who are gathering together on the footpaths and doing some informal activities there, every time there is a traffic jam and what have you, the planner is often blamed. So I think the master planning exercise of Delhi is an opportunity for us to clarify as to what on earth is this master plan. Is this master plan supposed to solve each and every problem in the city? Or what exactly is the master plan supposed to do? And after the master plan document is prepared, what the other people are supposed to do? Who has a role to play for what? Including you and me as a citizen, we also have a role to play. If we keep dirtying the city, then a very beautiful master plan cannot make the beautiful city, because you and me are dirtying the city all the time. So therefore, I think this clarification needs to be made, and this is a great opportune time for us to make this clarification. Point number 2 is, I understand some very good number of consultations have been made. We just heard, firstly, let me congratulate both the presenters. I think they made excellent presentations. So these consultations are very nice. Whenever a master plan is prepared, we make a large number of consultations. I think this time around, more consultations have been made than perhaps in the past. But let me tell you, having in the last 6 years, having been involved very closely with the government, I find that many decisions are taken where there are no consultations at all. For instance, there are umpteen number of flyovers that get built, and then they just there is hardly any consultation with the local citizens. So many day-to-day projects are being implemented in the city without the so-called public consultation. So therefore there is a big issue there. There's a big gap there. We need to look at that. The third point which I want to make is look at the master plan from the point of view of a poor migrant who doesn't know what on earth the master plan is all about. He picks up a train from Motihari in Bihar, and he comes all the way to Delhi because his friend has told him that there is some livelihood opportunity here. He gets down at the railway station. He doesn't know where to go, or maybe his friend leads him to some place. He finds a location. He goes somewhere near Rajpath. He is shooed away by the police. He cannot squat there. So he goes underneath some flyover. He goes to some place. He has to answer the nature's call. He doesn't know where the toilet is located. So and so on and so on. These are not one or two people. There are thousands coming into the city every day, and there are a few million such people, and that's how the whole squatting takes place. Does the master plan address the requirements of this gentleman? Does the master plan even consult him when the master plan is being prepared? Is this activity which happens on a daily basis even within the purview of the master plan or not? Because quite often the master planner is blamed that what are you doing to all these fellows who are hanging around everywhere and they're dirtying the city? Are you providing housing for all of these fellows? Are you providing toilets for all of these people? Where are they going to earn their incomes and livelihoods? They're not going to buy the shop in the mall. He will sell chai pakoda on the roadside. So where are we on this? There has to be some clarity. We have to address this squarely and upfront and say that, look, this is within our purview. It is not in our purview. Somebody else has to look at it, and so on and so forth. So this is one thing. The fourth point is the city in the regional context. I think somebody has already spoken about it. I will not say much on this. The fifth and the most important point, and the last point which I want to make, is that we often don't tell anyone as to how much it is going to cost me to make this plan, to implement this plan. You can make lovely plans, but then if I have to implement this plan, then how much is it going to cost me? Where is the money going to come from? Do I have this money or not? So like they say, you need to make the coat as measured to the cloth that you have. Are we building castles in the air? Do we have enough money? So can we really look into the future, into the next 20 years and say that this is how I'm going to mobilize the funds? Because to build all the roads and the infrastructure and all the metros, whatever, you need a hell of a lot of money. So do we even have a broad idea as to how much it is going to cost us? And then later on we say after 20 years, we will all meet and we will say that, sorry, we could not implement the master plan. We did a lot of things because there was no funds. So I think the financing of the plan is also something that we need to look at. So I will stop here. I have many more points, but I think these 5 points I thought that I'll just share with you. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Professor Ashok, over to you.
Meshram wants to make a comment. Professor Meshram.
I have only one suggestion to be made to the preparators of the plan, and that is what my humble submission. Not to make the master plan of Delhi very ambitious. I am again repeating the word very ambitious. Kindly see the ground realities and accordingly provide for in the master plan. I will just tell you, in the master plan 2021, on the first page of the master plan, it is written that to make Delhi as a world-class city. World-class city. How can you make Delhi a world-class city when 40% of the population is the urban poor and lives in the slums? So such kinds of the political statements, my humble submission, the planner should not make in the master plan. And don't make the very ambitious. This is what Professor Rao also said, that what will be the cost? So making the provisions, but without having the money, we just cannot implement the plan. So kindly take that particular aspect also into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite our Honorary Secretary, Delhi Regional Chapter, Mr. J.K. Kapoor, to extend a vote of thanks. Kapoor sir.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of DRC Executive Committee 2021, I would like to extend my gratitude and thankfulness to key panelists, Professor Poonam Prakash, Madam, Madam Neenu Sehgal. Unfortunately, she could not join. Nilesh, who agreed for this presentation on very short notice. We talked to him just 1 hour before to him. Anyway, we are very thankful to Nilesh. Dr. Rao Saab for expert comment. And secondly, I will be failing my duties if I don't express my heartfelt gratitude towards ITPI headquarters, especially Dr. D.S. Meshram, President ITPI, and Shri Pradeep Kapoor Saab, Secretary General of ITPI, for extending all logistic support for organizing this webinar. And I'm also thankful to our DRC Chairman, Professor Ashok Kumar, who moderated the session very well, and team DRC, my teammates in DRC Executive who are behind the success of this program. Thank you, everybody, for attending this interactive session. We look forward for your participation in future also. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Close the meeting, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Both the key speakers.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
G.
you.
Kumar, joining us from Chandigarh.